I still can't forget what happened that night. Follow my story step by step, and maybe, just maybe, you'll feel the same cold stare I did that night in the dark. It was about a month ago. This year, I finally kept a promise I'd made to myself. Like I do every summer, I took some time off work and escaped to a remote campsite. I was done with noisy vacation spots, crowded hotels, and drunk laughter echoing from nearby tents. That's not me anymore. I crave silence. Most of the time, silence gives me peace. I packed up my camper van and headed toward the mountains, to a small clearing I'd found by chance a few years back. No one ever goes there. No cell signal. No internet. Just thick pine trees that barely let the sky through. And at night, a sky full of stars, like pinpricks in the dark. It was my second night there. Sometime after midnight, just like the night before. Inside the camper, the yellow lights made it feel like a little fortress surrounded by pitch-black silence. Outside, the only sound was the wind brushing through the trees. I slipped into my sleeping bag and slowly closed my eyes. I don't know how long I slept, but I woke up. Something felt off. There was this slow-growing discomfort in my chest. At first, I didn't understand why. Then I saw it. A steady light was shining through the small side window of the camper. Not flickering, not moving, just there. Bright and focused, like someone holding a flashlight right up to the glass. It wasn't moonlight. The moon doesn't shine that directly. This was something else. My throat went dry. The air inside felt heavier, almost dense. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. I just waited. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe it was nothing. But deep down, I knew. Someone was out there. I stood up slowly. The light didn't move. It stayed focused on the window. Through the thin curtain, I reached out and carefully pulled it aside just a little. And then, we locked eyes. Someone was standing just outside the camper, expressionless. Not scared, not angry, just there. A pale, dirty face under a sagging hat. Eyes that seemed to glow in the dark. The flashlight in his hand was aimed directly at my face, and in that moment, time just stopped. It couldn't have been more than a few seconds, but it felt like hours. I finally snapped out of it, stumbled backward and hit my head on the roof. My heart was hammering like it was trying to escape my chest. This wasn't a joke. There was no one else out here, no other campers. The nearest town was a 40-minute drive. I hadn't seen a single person in days. And then I heard it. Footsteps, soft, deliberate footsteps circling the camper. They started on the left side, then slowly moved toward the back. I held my breath, covered my mouth. Each step sounded like it was driving a nail deeper into my chest. And then they stopped, right in front of the door. The handle turned, slowly, a few clicks, then another, stronger attempt. I had locked the door, but with every twist of that handle, I felt something inside me cracking. "Hey, who's there?" I shouted. My voice came out broken, shaky. I forced myself to move closer to the door, even though every instinct was screaming for me to run. There was no reply, just breathing, heavy, muffled breathing, right on the other side, as if someone was standing there, breathing directly at me. I grabbed my phone. No signal, of course. And that's when I really understood what it meant to be alone. I rushed to the front and jumped behind the wheel, turned the key. Nothing, just a click. Tried again. Same thing. Again. This time, the engine sputtered to life. I slammed the headlights on, threw it into gear, and hit the gas. The tires spun in the mud before I managed to get traction and tear out of that clearing. I sped down the narrow path between the trees. Only the space in front of the headlights was visible. Everything else was shadows, and every one of those shadows felt like it could leap at me. I kept driving. My hands were slick with sweat. My heart was thudding so loudly I couldn't hear anything else. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. I kept seeing that door handle turning in my mind over and over. And then I looked in the rearview mirror. I froze. The place I had just left, I could still see it. The moon had climbed higher now, casting more light, and I saw it. He was still standing there, in the exact same spot. The lantern in his hand had gone out, and his face was lost in shadow. But his outline was clear. He was still watching me. His arm was down now, and in that hand, there was an axe. The lights passed over him, but I still saw it. I still see it. He didn't move. Maybe he's still there. Maybe he wasn't alone. I'll never forget that night, and I still ask myself the same question. What if the engine hadn't started? What if he had gotten inside? Would there even be anyone left to tell this story? I have been living alone in this summer house for the past month. Actually, we used to come here as a family when I was a child, but over time, everyone went their separate ways. They didn't come back, but I stayed. Whenever the city becomes too much for me, I find myself here, away from the noise, the crowds, the constant hustle and bustle. This place is surrounded by silence, and I've grown accustomed to it. I used to visit the summer house every year, but this time I wanted to stay longer. Maybe to escape something, maybe to find something. I don't know. Over time, people forget exactly what they're chasing. At night, the inside of the summer house is dark. Even if you close the curtains, the darkness outside seeps through the windows. It's as if the forest has come right up to the window and is peering inside. But that night, instead of looking out the window, I wanted to go outside. I wanted to take a short ride on my dirt bike, just to get some fresh air. The air was cool. The sky was clear, but the moon wasn't visible. I put my flashlight in my bag. My bike started without a hitch. A slight vibration, a familiar hum. The headlights slowly illuminated the narrow curves of the road. I turned back to the familiar route at first, but after a few hundred meters, I stopped. On the right, there was a narrow path, almost too narrow to notice. It had never caught my attention before. Maybe it had always been right in front of my eyes, but for some reason, I had never gone down it. This time I felt a strange curiosity. I wanted to stray from the paths I knew. I turned the steering wheel in that direction. At first, it was beautiful. Dense trees, bending branches, the sound of the engine cutting through the night. The path was straight, and the ground wasn't too bad. It was as if no one else had ever used it, but nature was still there. That's why it was beautiful. After a while, I noticed that the road was getting worse. First, the stones on the ground disappeared, then the soil softened. The engine started to shake slightly. The branches were no longer just passing over me. They were hitting me directly in the face. In some places, I had to get out and push the car by hand. The headlights only illuminated a few meters ahead. The rest was completely dark. At one point, I stopped. There was no point in going any further. The GPS signal had already been lost. I decided to turn back. But at that moment, the engine suddenly shook. A tremor, then a muffled sound, and it fell silent. For a few seconds, my hand was still on the throttle. as if doing so would make the engine change its mind and start again. Then I turned the key. There was no response, not a twitch, not a sound. I got off and checked around the engine. The chain was intact. There was fuel. But the engine was silent, as if something had drained everything inside it. I waited a bit. Maybe it would start if it cooled down, I thought. I took out my flashlight and scanned the area. Just dense trees, muddy ground, and my own footprints behind me. I was there, in the middle of the forest, alone. Then I heard a sound, the faint sound of footsteps, a sound that found its place in the silence, almost unnatural, as if the silence itself had receded upon hearing it. I turned and pointed the flashlight in that direction. There was something among the trees, a shadow, a branch. Then a figure appeared. It was standing still, motionless, a human silhouette. But its face was not clear. It was wearing muddy clothes and holding a dark object in its hand, the nature of which was unclear. It took a few steps toward me. It was holding a rifle. It spoke in a calm but unsettling voice. "What are you doing here? This is private property." At that moment, I saw the rifle. My mind went blank. I couldn't think or move. My heart stopped beating for a moment. My eyes were fixed on the barrel of the gun. I didn't think. I left the engine where it was. I started running in the direction I had come from. My feet were sinking into the mud. Branches were hitting my face, and I was struggling to breathe. The flashlight trembled in my hand, its light swaying from side to side. But behind me I sensed a presence, as close as my breath. As I ran, a strange feeling grew inside me. I was sure that something was following me. At some point I realized I had strayed from the path. The trees were unfamiliar now. Maybe I was in the same forest, but in a different place. I paused for a moment while running, not to catch my breath, but because I realized I had lost my sense of direction. But at that moment, I saw a light in the distance, a yellowish, flickering glow. I couldn't believe my eyes. Home. The windows of the summer house. I still don't know how I got there. Maybe my sense of direction was still working, or maybe something else brought me there. But the house was there, its familiar shape, its small porch. I opened the door so quickly that my hand was still shaking. I didn't look back. I went inside, locked the door, and drew the curtains. Then I sat in the middle of the house, under the light. The silence had returned, but it was different now. It wasn't the silence from outside, but a silence growing inside. The next morning, I left the house. Imagine experiencing this terrifying ordeal. What would you do? What would you feel if you were alone in the forest and a figure approached you? Share your thoughts in the comments. It happened 3 months ago. I've been living alone in this summer house for several years now. The noise, the crowds, the constant rush of the city, it had all started to wear me down. Escaping here during the summers, being alone with nothing but silence, always helped me reset. Some days, I wouldn't speak to a single person. I'd just sit and listen to the sounds of nature. Silence had always been a friend of mine. Until that night. The back of the house faces a dense, almost untouched forest. In my garden, I keep a few potted plants that grow in the shade of the trees. Every evening, I water them. It's a quiet little ritual that grounds me. That evening began just like any other. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The air was starting to cool. I picked up the hose and began watering the plants, same as always. Then I heard it. A sound coming from the woods. At first I thought it was just the wind, but then, crack, the sharp snap of dry branches breaking. It sent a chill down my spine, and then another. This one was clearer, rhythmic, intentional. It sounded like footsteps, careful, deliberate. Someone walking, trying not to be heard. They weren't too close, but they weren't far either. Right at the edge of the trees, just beyond where I could see, but close enough to feel. I froze. Then, pretending everything was fine, I kept watering the plants. I forced myself to move slowly, calmly. A few minutes later, I turned off the hose and began coiling it up. My heart was pounding in my throat. The unease creeping through me felt like it was spreading in waves. That's when my dog stopped. He was wandering the garden like usual, but suddenly he froze. His ears perked up. He let out a low, tense growl. He stared straight at the forest, not moving, not blinking. It was like he was locked onto something. I called him over. He came, but his eyes never left that dark patch of trees. We closed the garden gate and went inside. I locked the door, pulled the curtains shut, washed my face, sat on the couch. But the feeling didn't go away. It's probably just a fox, I told myself, or some other animal, but part of me didn't buy that. Those footsteps, they had rhythm, purpose, they sounded human, too precise to be random. The tension stayed with me all night. I left the TV on, hoping a little noise would help me forget. It didn't. My ears were still straining to catch the faintest sound. My dog curled up next to the couch, but he didn't really sleep. His eyes were half open, his ears alert. It was after midnight when I decided to go to bed, but that uneasy feeling still clung to me. My bedroom faces the forest. I shut the curtains, turned off the light. The room was instantly swallowed in darkness. The silence was too quiet. Even my own breathing felt loud. I closed my eyes, tried to sleep, and then I heard it again. Only this time it was closer, clear, slow, careful. Footsteps, crunching softly over dry leaves. Then, nothing. A pause. Then one more step, and another pause. I was frozen. My heart slammed in my chest. My throat was dry. I tried to swallow, but no sound came. I turned toward the window and just barely pulled back the edge of the curtain. That's when I saw them. There was someone at the window, staring directly at me. Our eyes met. I froze, my limbs tangled. I stumbled backward, breath caught in my throat. My hands were shaking uncontrollably as I fumbled for my phone. I finally managed to press the screen and call the police. My voice was raspy, barely there. I gave them my address. They told me to stay calm. A unit would arrive in 15 minutes. Those 15 minutes, they were the longest of my life. I didn't move, didn't turn on the lights. I just stared at the window, at the door, at the walls, waiting. Then, finally, a siren pierced the silence. I rushed to the door and opened it. 2 officers stepped in. They checked on me quickly, then headed out to the garden. They circled the house, searching. It didn't take long. At the back of the house, just beside the narrow trail into the woods, they found things. A worn-out blanket, a torn backpack. Inside were empty cans, cracker wrappers, and a small portable camping stove. It looked like someone had been living there for weeks, quietly, hidden, watching. Was it just a coincidence? Or had they been planning to come inside all along? Had they been out there during the nights and watching me through the days? And that face I saw at the window, how long had they been standing there? What if I hadn't called the police? What if I had just gone to sleep? maybe I wouldn't be here to tell this story. So now I'm asking you, what do you think? Was it just someone looking for shelter? Or did they have something much darker in mind? Let me know in the comments. Maybe you noticed something I didn't.